Hey friends, Dean here. Before we get you on to your episode, I want to take a moment to invite you to our next virtual online trivia night. Wednesday, May 13th at 8 p.m. Join us either on our Facebook group or on our YouTube page for 3 rounds of fun trivia, music questions, movie questions, general knowledge questions. It'll be a fun time and a chance to win some prizes and have just a good relaxing night of some trivia at home. You don't even have to go out for it. So don't forget, Wednesday, March 13th at 8 p.m. Join us on our Facebook group or YouTube for 3 rounds of fun virtual online trivia. We'll see you there.
In this quick hit, we're taking a look at a Billboard chart record set by the Beatles in 1964 that stood until 2021. What was the record and who broke it? All that coming up next.
You're listening to a 3324 podcast quick hit with Dean Legiro, where Dean shares stories and trivia about his favorite chart hits, actors, movies, and more.
Welcome, friends, to this week's 3324 podcast quick hit. I'm Dean Legiro, welcoming you aboard and encouraging you to join us on social media. We're at 3324 podcast on Instagram and Facebook. We've got a great group on Facebook. You can post your favorite music and movie memories. Join us there, won't you? If you're looking for longer content, every Thursday we've got full-length episodes about the music and movies that shaped our lives, so we will see you there as well. For this episode, we're going to talk about an amazing, amazing record that the Beatles set in 1964 that has stood the test of time almost until 2021. But before we start with the Beatles, we're going to roll back just a little bit of information and background about the Billboard charts. And how the rock and roll era fits into it. So, for all intents and purposes, the rock and roll chart era started the week of July 9th, 1955. And that's when the single Rock Around the Clock hit number 1 by Bill Haley and the Comets. And it stayed there for 8 weeks. And that was the signal that something new was happening on the horizon. It was a new type of music that was penetrating and finally making its way to the masses. Rock and roll was basically here to stay at that point. For the most part, though, when you look at the charts and the number ones that came after it, not a lot of other rock and roll artists really were hitting the top, not until April 27th of 1956, when an unknown artist named Elvis Presley would hit number 1 with Heartbreak Hotel, and oddly enough, that would stay at number 1 for 8 weeks as well. The floodgates were open. The week of November 3rd of the same year, Elvis would have the number 1 and the number 2 spot on the charts. Number 1 with Love Me Tender and number 2 with Don't Be Cruel. And Elvis would continue to sporadically pepper the charts with number 1 hits, interspersed with girl groups, some doo-wop groups, some of the Elvis Light, what we would call Elvis Light artists like Paul Anka and Pat Boone, kind of an answer to rock and roll, kind of a lighter version of that. Elvis Presley would go into the Army also, so the charts would kind of go dormant for a while. He would return in 1961, and that activity would perk up. But what we really want to talk about is February 1st, 1964. I Want to Hold Your Hand by the Beatles hits number 1 for 7 weeks. Right after that, She Loves You hits number 1 for 2 weeks. And right after that, consecutively, the third number 1 hit in a row, Can't Buy Me Love, hit the top of the charts the week of April 4th, and that stayed for 5 weeks. Here's where the record comes in, which is really important and has stood the test of time until recently. The Beatles would actually hold the top 5 places on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. Spots 1 through 5 would be occupied by the Beatles, and they are as follows. At number 1 was Can't Buy Me Love. Number 2 was Twist and Shout. Number 3 was She Loves You. Number 4 was I Want to Hold Your Hand. And number 5 was Please, Please Me. This was unprecedented, and this ushered in the British invasion and would cement the Beatles' popularity, their influence, cement them as the standard bearers for the British invasion and for rock music as it was back then. But there was also another record that was set at the same time. Now, before this, Elvis Presley had 9 hits in the top 100 all at once, scattered throughout. The week of April 11th, 1964, the Beatles had 14 songs in the top 100 chart. That's almost 15% of the songs you were listening to in the top 100 were from the Beatles. It is absolutely astounding. 14 songs in the top 100. You could not get away from the Beatles at this point. People were crazy for any material that was available. Parlophone Records, which is the English version, the English label that the Beatles were on, were partnering with Capitol Records, which was the U.S. distributor, to get as much product out there. And they were pushing out Beatles singles and cobbling together Beatles albums out of the UK versions that were there, and taking tracks from different albums and making new albums to push to the US market to get the product out there, to fulfill the crazy demand. They would also set another record in 1964. This one for the most amount of number one singles in a calendar year. And that would be 6 in 1964. They also hold the number 2 spot. The following year, 1965, they had 5 number one singles in a calendar year. These stats are absolutely incredible. I don't know if they could ever, this amount of stats, I'm not sure, or these amount of records, I'm not sure could ever be replicated again. There are many artists have tried, many have come and gone. There have been many artists that have been called the new Beatles when they come on the scene, and expectations are probably more than any artist could live up to. And when we talk about achievements like this from the Billboard charts, you can really see the impact that the Beatles had at the time. The term Beatlemania, it absolutely fits. This is exactly what people mean when we talk about Beatlemania. They were occupying the charts, products, novelty toys, everything was the Beatles. But it would take a while. But there is an artist who could actually break this record and outdo the Beatles. On September 18th, 2021, Drake would shatter the Beatles' top 5 record with an astounding 9 out of the top 10 singles coming from the Canadian rapper. An absolute incredible achievement. 9 out of the top 10 singles for the week of September 18th, 2021 were occupied by Drake. He had an absolute stranglehold on the top 10, which is unheard of before. If you thought 5 was a lot, 9 out of 10 is absolutely astounding. I don't ever foresee if that could be broken, but I think in 1964, I don't think anybody thought that the Beatles record would be broken. Either way, both of these artists deserve a lot of kudos and a lot of respect for being able to tap into the consciousness at the time and what people were listening to and what kind of music they wanted and deliver it. So the Beatles occupied the top 5 spots in 1964. Drake would break that in 2021 and occupy 9 out of the top 10 Billboard chart singles spots. An absolutely amazing achievement. We'll put it in the show notes. We'll put these songs in there so you can hear the top 5 for that week for the Beatles. You can find that and kind of take a trip back down memory lane to 1964. That's going to do it for this quick hit. As I said before, you can find us on social media at 3324 Podcast on Instagram and on Facebook. Join us every Thursday for brand new full-length episodes, won't you? We would appreciate it. We will see you there. And this has been Dean. Thank you for joining us. We will see you soon.
This has been a 3324 Podcast Quick Hit. You can find us on your favorite podcast provider. So please like, subscribe, and rate to become a part of the 3324 family. Your feedback is important, so please make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at 3324 Podcast and on Twitter at 3324P to join the conversation.